right, so these are your part 3 notes for P3. We're going to be factoring when A is 1, factoring by grouping, and then factoring when A is not 1. So the first section we're going to look at is factoring when A is equal to 1. In order to do this, you are going to have a trinomial, so 3 terms. The x squared is not going to have a number in front of it. It's going to be understood that it's a coefficient of 1. And you're going to have your constant that you're going to find the factors of that add up to be your b term. Your b term is the one with the x. With that, you are then going to separate that x squared to be x plus or minus a number times x plus or minus a number. Those numbers that are going to be in the parentheses with x are going to be the factors of your constant. So if you look at example A, you're given x squared plus 7x plus 12. For this one, your constant is that 12. So we want to find all of the factors of 12. We have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. If we add the 3 and the 4, that gives us our 7 that we're looking for with the 7x. So this factors to be x plus 3 times x plus 4. For example B, we have x squared minus 2x minus 48. So we want to find the factors of negative 48 that add up to be negative 2. From 48, you have 1 and 48, 2 and 24, not 42, 24, 3 and 16, 4 and 12, 6 and 8. Now, you're working with a negative 48, which means your signs are going to be opposite with these numbers. So it's either going to be a positive 1 and a negative 48, or a negative 1 and a positive 48, a negative 2 and a positive 24, or a positive 2 and a negative 24, and so on. If you look at the 6 and the 8, if the 8 is negative and the 6 is positive, that would give you the negative 2 that you're looking for when you combine them. So this just factors to be x plus 6 times x minus 8. For our next one, example C, we have y squared minus y minus 30. Your factors of that negative 30 that add up to be negative 1, we're going to find. So we have 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. We're looking for a negative 1. So if that 6 is negative and that 5 is positive, that gives us the negative 1 that we're looking for. So this just factors to be y plus 5 times y minus 6. For example D, we have x squared plus 17x plus 30. We already said that those factors of 30 are 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, and 5 and 6. If we're looking for a positive 17, when we combine these, that 2 and that 15 both have to be positive to give us 17. So that's just x plus 2 times x plus 15. For example E, you have y squared plus 6y minus 27. So your factors of negative 27 or 27 are 1 and 27, 3 and 9. If your 3 is negative and that 9 is positive, that's what's going to give you that positive 6. So this just factors to be y minus 3 times y plus 9. For example F, we have x squared minus 23x minus 50. What are your factors of negative 50?
1 and 50.
Mm-hmm.
2 and 25.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be 2 and 25.
Okay, so what do they have? What signs are on each?
Sorry?
What signs do they have? Like the 2 is?
Oh, the 2 is positive and the 25 is negative.
Good. So that gives you negative 23. So what is this factor for?
X plus 2 and x minus 25.
Good. All right, so the next part that we're going to look at is factoring by grouping. When you factor by grouping, you're going to be given 4 terms. Within these 4 terms, you're going to group the first 2 in a set of parentheses, then group the last 2 in a set of parentheses. From both of the parentheses that you form, you are going to factor out the greatest common factor. When you factor out the greatest common factor, you will rewrite it as that greatest common factor times whatever's left over, plus or minus another greatest common factor times whatever's left over. Whatever's left in the parentheses at that point should be the same. If they are the same, you're going to rewrite the set of parentheses that occur twice, one time, and then form another with your greatest common factors that you factored out. If your 2 parentheses are not the same, you cannot factor by grouping. So if we look at example A here, we have x cubed plus x squared plus 4x plus 4. We have 4 terms, so we're going to group the first 2. We're going to group the last 2. Between the first 2, our greatest common factor is x squared. Between the last 2, our greatest common factor is 4. So we factor out the x squared. We're going to have x squared times x plus 1. If we factor out the 4, we're going to have 4 times x plus 1. From here, your 2 parentheses are identical to one another, so we're going to rewrite the x plus 1 one time, and then form another set of parentheses with the x squared plus 4. Now this, you cannot factor any further. You might think you can because the x squared and the 4, because you can take the square root of both of those terms, but there is not a negative in between the 2. So you cannot factor that any further. That is your answer. For example B, you have x cubed minus 2x squared minus 3x plus 6. Again, you have 4 terms with this one, so we're going to group the first 2, group the last 2. From the first 2, you have x cubed and negative 2x squared. You're going to factor out the greatest common factor, which is x squared. From the last 2, you have a negative 3x and a positive 6. That first term is negative, so you want to factor out a negative. You want it to end up to where that first term is positive. From there, they both are divisible by 3, so that negative 3 is what we'll factor out. So we're going to have x squared times x minus 2 and negative 3 times x minus 2 when we factor out those greatest common factors. From here, both of your parentheses are the same, so we rewrite the x minus 2 once, and then form another with the x squared minus 3. Now this x squared minus 3 has an x squared and it has a negative, but that 3 you cannot take the square root of, so we're going to leave it just like this. For example C, we have 2x cubed plus 5x squared plus 6x plus 16. We're going to group the first 2 terms, group the last 2 terms. From the first 2 terms, our greatest common factor is what? Just x squared. From the second 2 terms that are grouped, what is our greatest common factor? 3. So that's going to give us x squared times 2x plus 5 plus 3 times 2x plus 5. Your 2 sets of parentheses that are left over are identical to one another. So we're going to write that one once and then form another with your x squared and your plus 3. For example D, we have 5x cubed minus 10x squared minus 3x plus 6. So again, 4 terms, so group up the first 2, group up the last 2. From the first 2, our greatest common factor is what? From the last 2, what's our greatest common factor? Negative 3. Good. So what is going to give us 5x squared times x minus 2 minus 3 times x minus 2. 2 parentheses are the same, so we have x minus 2 times 5x squared minus 3. Your next part goes over factoring when a is not 1. I'm going to write these steps down. You might want to write them down also. So your first step when a is not 1 is you are going to multiply a and c. From there, you're going to find the factors of a times c that add up to be b. You will then replace your b term with those factors. So that way you have 4 terms, and then you will factor by grouping. So like I just said, multiply your a and your c, find your factors of a times c that add up to be b, replace your b term with those 2 factors and the variable, then factor by grouping. For this example, we have 6x squared plus 17x plus 5. We have an x squared that has a coefficient other than 1. So we're going to multiply 6 and 5. That gives us 30. We're going to find the factors of 30 that add up to be 17. If we have 2 and positive 15, that gives us 17. So from here, we're going to add on that x to both the 2 and the 15 and replace the 17x with the 2x plus 15. So that's going to give us 6x squared plus 2x plus 15x plus 5. You now have 4 terms, so factor this by grouping. Group the first 2, group the last 2. Between the first 2, your greatest common factor is 2x. Between the last 2, your greatest common factor is positive 5. This is going to get rewritten as 2x times 3x plus 1 plus 5 times 3x plus 1. 2 sets of parentheses that are left over are identical, so rewrite the 3x plus 1 one time, and then form another with the 2x and the positive 5. For our next example, we have 2x squared plus x minus 15. For this one, we're going to multiply the 2 and the negative 15, which gives us negative 30. We want the factors of negative 30 that add up to be positive 1. If we work with a negative 5 and a positive 6, and we combine those, that gives us a positive 1. So this gets rewritten as 2x squared minus 5x plus 6x minus 15. We have 4 terms, so we'll factor by grouping. Group the first 2, group the last 2. From the first 2, your greatest common factor is just x. From the last 2, your greatest common factor is 3. So this gets rewritten as x times 2x minus 5 plus 3 times 2x minus 5. Your 2 sets of parentheses are identical to one another. So this is going to give you 2x minus 5 times x plus 3. For your last one, you're given 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. So this one, we're going to multiply the 2 and the negative 3. That gives us negative 6. Our factors of negative 6 that add up to be positive 5 are negative 1, positive 6. So this gets rewritten as 2x squared minus x plus 6x minus 3. I'm going to group the first 2, group the last 2, factor out an x from the first, factor out a positive 3 from the second. This is going to give us x times 2x minus 1 plus 3 times 2x minus 1. Your 2 parentheses are the same, so we write it down once and then form another with the x plus 3.